This week on the Old School RuneScape update, more Pole 83 changes arrive, including Crab Slayer, Fairy Rings on the map, and Seed Packs. Also, is the Tumeken Shadow a problem? We discuss how it impacts the Delve boss rewards. Finally, Cireon's explainer on 16-bit audio. This is the Old School RuneScape Update, Episode 70, recorded Saturday, May 29th, 2025. Propellor Hat Media. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. This week is Pole 83 QOL week, but you know, aside from the Pole 83 QOL changes, Cireon, I feel like there's a couple of other little things that you and I want to discuss around the edges of that, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot.
I have a favorite. I know you have a favorite. We'll see if we converge on being the same favorites, of course. But of course, hopefully everybody enjoyed last week's special episode on sailing. That was definitely a fun one to do. And I hope everybody enjoyed the alpha if you participated. But nonetheless, if you want to look at that episode or any of the other episodes or get episodes into the future, the best way to do that is to head on over to update.show/OS and subscribe there. We're on all the major podcast listening services out there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, and more, as well as YouTube as well, youtube.com/@OSRS update. But let's just begin by diving into some of these Pole 83 QOL changes here, because we've been getting a few of them already. But if we were to just use this list as a grab bag here, which of the ones here are your favorite this week that we got?
I like that the crabs are now in there as tasks. Like, it sounds like a silly thing, and it's not going to be useful for me, but I do like the fact that it makes more things in the game discoverable by playing the game.
Right. And, as strange as it might be to people who listen to this show, there are people who don't use the wiki to play and probably don't even know the wiki exists.
Yeah, or you're playing unguided and doing all of the quests. No, it's yes. I think that one was really good.
Okay. For me, I have to, of course, go to the farming ones in particular. The streamlining that was done with the farming contracts at Jane, that was always something that was a little bit confusing. And I feel like the place that exemplified the dialogue tree here the most as being a bit cumbersome was Leagues 4, when we had the instant farming growth for everything in terms of just spamming the contracts. You spent more time talking to Jane than you actually did interacting with the farming.
Oh god,
trees
yes.
there.
Yes.
You took that relic in Leagues 4, right?
Yeah.
I think most everyone did, and that's why it was changed for 5, because it was a little bit too powerful. But
the fairy rings on the map are also nice. I definitely have run into that problem before when playing on my iPad when on the road. Like, oh god, what's this fairy ring?
And that's a thing.
I've gotten so used to just quickly checking the world map in Runelight that this was a massive thing I missed.
Yeah. Any tithe farm enjoyers here? I know I spent my time there getting the Agricole's can and the weedless patches. I don't necessarily know that I'd want to go back, but you can go back and you get the seed packs there, the same seed packs as the tier 3 farming guild contract rewards ones.
Yep, I probably will not go back for that, but it's nice to have a little small thing to.
What about when your iron gets to tithe farm for seeds?
Yes, though I would prefer doing contracts.
So it's slower.
This is, of course, this is a really good way to do them live, without waiting. And then tier 3, right? Which it's gonna take a while until I'm unlocking tier 3 seed packs to begin with. So
yeah. So it's juicy from that perspective. There's also the Explorer's Ring Alchemy, which streamlines the process for that, which I guess was something that was needed along the way just for the free alks that are there. But I think one of the biggest things that people will probably look over in this list is the personalized settings for new accounts. In particular, the 3 rungs that are there.
Yeah, I was ready to mention that, but
because you don't think about it. It's like a certain degree of onboarding, and if you can make those changes to a point that it becomes easier to interact with the game, you're removing that one barrier to somebody who's going to, if you're playing mobile, you're competing for so many other apps, and it just helps along the way there.
But also the experienced player settings, I think, whenever I have to, like, I probably still don't have most of these set correctly on my Iron Man. So every now and then I just run into something and it doesn't work like expected.
Yeah.
I just need to go in and I feel most of the people use these settings, like shift clicking to drop items.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it tripped me up so much that I couldn't do that during the sailing off. I've come to rely on that quite a lot.
Contrary to popular belief, in terms of it being a good setting, I don't actually hide my roofs.
I have started doing it. I like how it looks without it, but I did try. I think there's a Runelight plugin that allows you to change it so that the roofs are visible. But if you move your mouse cursor over it, it disappears. But I found that too jarring, so I think I got rid of them.
Okay.
I got rid of them eventually because it does help in navigation. But I wish it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, that's a byproduct of even going back to Classic when we didn't have roofs. That's why that setting was there. Prayer tool tips, wonderful. I mean, drain rate. It shows the drain rate. I was telling you a story in pre-show that back in the day we collaborated with RuneHQ to build the prayer drain calculator and reverse engineer from just timings and whatnot what the drain rate of these various prayers were. So it's just so nice seeing these sorts of things working their way into the main game here after all these years. Skill guide summaries. I feel like this one's maybe a mixed bag out of everything that's here.
I like it. Again, I'm all for discoverability of how the game works within the game, but the skill guides are not the right place for this, are they? It feels like such a hacky solution, and the skill guides in general, I don't like them. I never use them. I also always go to the wiki. So if you're familiar with it, if you search for the skill and then level up table, you get a combined table with all of the unlocks by level. I find it much more useful. So I don't know. It feels like this needs a bigger overhaul to be useful. And maybe at that point, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's the same as the leaks task. There's a bunch of these interfaces that have to present so much information that it's really hard to get that information in a nice format in the game itself.
Yeah, so why, right? And I mean, it's a good idea, but
it should still be there realistically, but at the same time, maybe not.
Yeah. Okay. But that's most of I think the Pull 83 things that we wanted to call out. Other thing on the news posts here, more emotes. It can be looped. Upwards of 45 new emotes. It can now be looped. I think the most interesting thing is the fact here is we have this little dance show being shown in the GIF on the news post. Now.
Yeah, I went over them. It looks like most of the emotes are now loopable, this is kind of what I expected when we originally got this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I agree with that. I'm sorry about this, folks. I just got a absolutely amazing notification here. I just won a raffle on Star Trek Online. Sorry about that. That's quite a substantial one. Carrying on with OSRS news. Sorry about that, everyone. It just popped up right in front of my face. But, yeah. Okay.
Alongside the messages from the Nigerian prince.
This one is not a Nigerian prince. I actually know the person who ran this raffle, so it's fine.
All right.
But,
all right.
I actually want to give a brief mention to the player support update before moving on to the other things, because we talked about this a bit on the RS3 show, but I feel like, especially when it comes to free-to-play old school, if you run into a bot and you report it, there is now the satisfaction of receiving a reply to your message center once that bot has been dealt with. Which I think is very important in the grand scheme of things, to feel like you're actually making a difference if you go out and report somebody that is botting, given the game's history with bot problems.
Yeah, that's a really important piece of feedback. I think if you want people to keep reporting, you need to share that.
Yeah. All right. Well, the saga of the Delve Boss rewards was not done. Where do you want to start with this? Do you want to start with the discussion about their commitment, or do you want to start with the fact that your shovel is no longer going to be added into game?
Oh, let's start with the shovel. I mean, it might still get us to the game, I guess, but my wish of at least it not coming from the Delve Boss came true.
Yeah, okay. Because
I don't know.
I agree with them in the second paragraph. They said, is that the version of the spade they're comfortable with releasing doesn't feel right with this level of content.
That I can see. I mean, I don't think it should have been a PVM reward to begin with, but yeah, I don't know. They really also they nerfed it quite a bit, because it would definitely have created like a new meta around farming, or at least have the possibility of a new one. The question is, how bad is that, right? And I think I saw something where it's like, oh, surge potions. Oh, totally happy with that, right? Even though that's going to change the meta of so many bosses, because you can now get a bunch of extra special attack energy, which is like, special attacks are pretty important in PVM efficiency. Yeah. So basically all of the loadouts, all of the like high scores, like everything is going to change. They're okay with that, but changing the farming meta is too much. Even though I don't necessarily quite enjoy the farming meta, which is doing your daily farm runs.
So I'm of two minds on this. As I know there's lots of people out there who don't enjoy the daily farm runs. I think that a reward like this is actually important to add into the game, to just have some sort of iteration on farming tools. Because I mean, we have upgraded watering can, we have the magic secateurs, we have the finger seed planting from barbarian training, and so on and so forth, right? But the question is, does it come from a Delve boss? And like you said, do you iterate on this content to a point that it changes the meta that much, or do you save that for a more specific farming reward space, right? I think that's the thing that we're kind of leading into on this.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest concern is I'm actually gonna back up the Iron Man community on this. Is that I feel like from the Iron Man side of it, maybe this would have been too powerful, and specifically the area that it came from. So probably a good idea to hit pause on the shovel for now.
Why would this be too powerful for the Iron Man community?
I mean, in terms of gaining access to it, if somebody wanted to focus on their skilling first on an Iron Man.
Okay, but then it's only the location, not the item itself.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's from where it comes from.
From an Iron Man perspective, having the ability to just speed up your allotment patch harvesting.
Oh no, that's fine. But I mean, if you were being a skiller first Iron Man, and you weren't able to go and you wanted to, get 99 farming first as an example, then this becomes an issue.
Yeah, but I think that the nerf they did to begin with, where they doubled the speed rather than making it instant, is already unnecessary.
Yeah. And the question is, I think, should, like, if we take this back one step more, should the spade reward space actually be something that's considered? And I think a lot of people are going to be on the fence for that, and maybe that's something that just more directly needed to be pulled. Like, I would have had no issue with either form of them, but like you said, it comes down to where it comes from, right?
I mean, that was my only complaint about it, really.
Yeah. So, good to hit pause on that one, I think. Now the big kahuna. When it comes time to talking about the rest of these rewards, everything comes back to the Tumeken shadow, doesn't it? In terms of best in slot magic for this.
Yeah. I don't think I fully appreciated before what really the problem was, but now that I've done some research and looked into it, the shadow is in this unfortunate position where basically every single magic item and upgrade is going to be affected by the shadow, because the shadow scales of all of the other stuff that's in the game by design, right? So, for those who don't know, simple version of what the shadow does is it triples all of your magic accuracy and magic damage bonus on any of your worn equipment by 3. So if you're wearing, say, 4 RMs, which gets you plus 8% magic damage bonus, Tumeken Shadow would turn it into 24. Now I need to get my numbers right. I believe the Occult Necklace is currently 6, so multiply that by that 3, that gets you like another 18%. So you can see this start stacking up really, really quickly, and then we haven't even talked about accuracy, which is
bigger, I think.
Huge, yeah, like absolutely huge, especially because if you take Tumeken's Shadow in combination with, say, Ancestral Robes, which is currently best in slot, you're basically making the Shadow able to just melt through even the relatively high magic defense of some bosses that you really aren't meant to use magic on.
Right, and then that gets into a question of combat integrity.
Yeah, exactly. So here you have the problem where they added this confliction gauntlets, and they do 2% more damage than the current best in slot, which is tormented gauntlets. But if you think about it, for the shadow, that's really just a 6% damage bonus, which already makes it more powerful than really designed. So what do? Do you accept that, or do you like keep these percentages arbitrarily low so that these items basically become very minor upgrades for all the people who don't have a shadow?
Right.
That's the trade-off they're making here. And what they've done with the confliction gauntlets, and I think this is kind of clever, right? So the confliction gauntlets have this special effect that make it so that if you miss, then the next attack, as long as you make it with the same spell or equipment or whatever, you roll accuracy twice, similar to
which is passive. I just want to say, because you said special, but passive.
It's a special effect. It's called a special effect.
Oh, okay.
Not a special attack, but it's on, this is on the special effects.
Okay, because I was just looking at the tooltip image they show, and it says passive. Anyways, Carry on.
So essentially what that does is it basically gives you the Fang effect. And because the shadow is already so accurate, this particular passive impacts non-shadow weapons more than the shadow itself. That's the idea behind it, which makes these gauntlets still useful to go after, even if you don't have a shadow.
Which is good, which is important, I think.
Yes. It's a clever and good solution, I think. at the same time, how long can we keep going with designing all of these special effects around it? Because it feels to me that every time we are introducing new magic equipment, it always runs into this problem. Always runs into the discussion. Half of it gets scrapped.
Yeah.
Half of it gets nerfed into the ground. And it really feels like that without changes to the shadow, we are really not able to move magic as a combat style forward. I feel the way the shadow skills of all of the other equipment means that no matter how much we power creep all of the other stuff, the shadow will always be a layer on top of that.
So my question,
The only thing that yes.
And you can decide if you want to answer this now or after you're done the track you're on. Was this why people did not like the iteration on the new quote-unquote best in slot magic cape?
I don't know. I don't understand enough, but I do think it. I mean, there was the idea that it needs to come from a wave-based counter because that's where the ranged melee capes come from. That was one thing as well, but it did also have the same problem with the shadow. Yes.
Okay.
So it was a compound problem. But yeah, I think the idea is that, they need to switch how the shadow work. And I think what I found really interesting is looking a little bit into the history of this, right? The original reason that the shadow got this particular effect is that the underlying design goal was to give reason for wearing things like the Sears ring or the Eternal boots, because before the shadow came out, especially in situations where you were doing switches, people didn't want to reduce the number of switches for that's because that's easy.
Mm-hmm.
But it also really meant that some of these items didn't have as much purpose, and they were really just focusing on defense rather than these sort of what we would call power armor in RS3, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the idea with the shadow is that by amplifying those effects, it's really giving you this added benefit of taking more switches because the difference is so much bigger.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we get to maybe the scary part. They are giving a commitment to make adjustments to the shadow before discussing any future best in slot magic reward space.
They have to. I think at this point they have to. Yes.
Will the community go for that? Because
no,
I have talked to people for whom the items that come from the raids, and in particular the shadow, are a god tier piece of equipment, and it is it is the most powerful thing in the game. They love it. It is a symbol of prestige and status. Will there be the support to change something like this? That's my question.
So, because I think the community is smart enough to see that this is a problem, because they are the ones that are talking about this problem whenever a new piece of magic gear is introduced, right? And sure, there will be people that don't like this, but this doesn't even have to be polled because it's a game integrity change. So ultimately, this is going to be one of those, either engage, give feedback, and get involved in the discussion to point it into a direction that you like, or go and whine and bitch about it all you want. But then they're just going to put in the game their first iteration because nobody is constructively engaging. Because it is a game integrity change that needs to happen.
I don't think they're going to be able to do it.
Yes, they are.
Because I feel like everything that was outlined with the shadow and just the way the shadow functions is, I don't think you can take that level of power away from somebody.
Yeah, we don't have to take this level of power away. We just have to make a weapon that is equally powerful with the current meta that doesn't scale whenever we roll out a new update.
And maybe the solution to that is then to just, make it, and take where the shadow is right now and go 10 to 15% beyond that, to the point you reach some sort of midpoint of what the bonuses look like when you're fully kitted out with the magic gear and the shadows, doing its thing.
Exactly.
Maybe
just
that's the solution.
Take the current basically max mage setup, right?
Yeah.
Note down what the bonuses are that you that you get, right? Then take the passive effect away, and then put the stats on the Tumeken Shadow that make up for the difference. That's the dumbest solution, but like nobody can really complain about it.
Yeah, and see that's the thing, is that you need something, I think, that people won't complain about, but you also.
But this is like the exact same thing how it happened with the occult necklace, and they got that changed too.
They did, but I don't think it's as big of a. I don't think there's as big of a stake behind it, because it's not from a raid. It's not worth oodles and oodles of GP.
But it changes every single magic item effect. I think you're underestimating the community here. I think you need to give them a chance to engage with this.
Well, we'll have to wait and see on that, because I don't know. I don't think it will be accepted.
I mean, one proposal I saw by someone, Travak Games, made this proposal. I will not take the credit of this, and I'll go and look up the video, or maybe we'll post it and we'll link it in the show notes, because he does a lot of spreadsheet math to show where the numbers sit compared to the current meta. But basically, his idea, which I feel very much is in the spirit of what the Shadow is for, while still solving the problem, is instead of multiplying the damage bonus on the equipment, is the stats on the Shadow itself are multiplied by the number of other equipment slots that give you a damage bonus.
Right.
So just as an example, if you're wearing like hat, top, and bottom, that's 3 items that have damage bonus, you would get like a 3 times multiplier. Then you add the occult, that's a times 4 multiplier. This still encourages the switches, and the nice thing is we know exactly how many equipment slots there are. So there's actually
there's a
hard cap.
And maybe that's the way to do it, is to have a community driven proposal, and then bring that into the OSRS combat team and iterate on it from there. And we go back to things in the past that have been community suggested and iterated on, like the rework of
I mean, the demonic spade was a community suggestion. So
yeah, okay.
All of Varlamore was a community suggestion, essentially. At least the land, layout.
Yeah, of course. Let us know what you think. I think that the Shadow discussion is going to be very interesting. And, it's one of those situations, like sailing, where you got to get it right, or else you're going to cause harm to the game going forward. And as much as we're hang on, just let me finish. As much as it feels like there's a certain degree of discourse on this right now, I think it is within everybody's interest to have a solution that is community centric on it, to ensure that it is able to be carried forward.
I don't think the stakes are that high. I think, if they mess this up, the game's gonna be dead. Is like
I don't think that's gonna happen. I just think that there's gonna be.
It basically can't get worse than it is right now. The game is actively hurting because of this right now. Even if the Band-Aid is not gonna
from a design perspective, yes, but I can guarantee you there are people who are absolutely happy with this level of damage that they can put out as a result of it, and are not going to want to have that go away.
Yeah, well, tough. They can go and play Dota.
Oh God, that's the funniest thing I've heard all month.
I mean, it's simple. It's simple like that. I mean, I'm sorry, but
And here I used to get in trouble for telling people to quit when they didn't like changes.
it's not as simple as like, but like, it's a single item. We've gone through these changes before. Even like we've gone through these changes before with raid items. The Fang was massively nerfed, and people still love it. Hell, I think even the Scythe was changed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So this is not the first time we're reworking a raid item.
All right.
It's not a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but also
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And I'm largely trying to play devil's advocate here because I see exactly what you're saying.
You've been talking too much to Faxi again.
Well, yeah, because I see from the system's perspective that this is not sustainable, right? It's not that I'm trying to, keep the shadow exactly as it is. That's not even my area of gameplay, I'm, like I said, largely playing devil's advocate, looking out for what could potentially happen here.
All right.
But I see the systems. I 100% see your concerns from the systems angle and the need for change. All right. Continuing on, we have something that we can hear. A move for the audio subsystem of the game to 16-bit audio. Now, right now, all audio in old school is played back as 8-bit audio, which is something that is a defining feature of the game. It goes back to the early era of gaming when 8-bit audio was the thing. And I feel like with everything we have with old school, it's really set itself into a unique genre itself from all the iconic tracks that are out there. And I guess the question we highlight with this, and you have done, you have put together the wonderful explainer on this one too, is that are people going to hear a difference moving from 8-bit to 16-bit, and will it in any way diminish the old school experience?
No, I don't think it will really diminish the experience. I think the iconic sound of old school doesn't really come from the quality of the audio. I mean, limitations spark creativity, and if you look at some of the old soundtracks on the NES and other sort of old consoles like the Game Boy, which had this limited audio chip, the fact that they had to only so many channels and so many bits to work with really sparked like creative solutions and interesting sort of techniques. None of that is going away.
Yeah, so let's break this down for the people who might not be aware of how audio works in terms of how audio is structured and what the difference in particular between 8-bit and 16-bit is.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all know that audio is basically waves, right? It's a waveform. But we can't really store waveforms sort of with full quality in a binary format that the computer can store and read.
Right, because
this is similar to, for example, colors, right? We can never store the full representation of the entire color spectrum because, that would require infinite data, essentially, about the exact combination of photons and their energy levels and whatever physical properties.
And even and this is a good thing. This is a good thing that's the same between colors and sounds, is that our eyes versus the eyes of, say, a different kind of animal are entirely different and perceive color differently, just like our ears work differently for what they can hear.
Yes.
And as a result of that, that also factors in to the storage of audio inside our computer systems in terms of how we've structured the files that play back to be in tune with how the human ear works.
Exactly. So just how we solved the problem with colors by basically dividing colors into combinations of like 3 colors, red, green, and blue, and then assigning a value between 0 and 255 for each of the 3 color values. We can basically represent a good representation of colors that quite well.
About 16 million.
Exactly. These days we have HDR and a lot more technologies to do more than that, but essentially that's what it comes down to. For audio, it works quite similar, but also quite different given the nature. So think about this waveform, like the theoretical waveform that represents the audio.
That you're listening to right now.
That you're listening to right now. What we do to store that is basically we take the waveform, and at a regular interval, we take samples. This happens many, many, many times per second.
The audio you're listening to right now is sampled at 44,100 hertz, so 44,100 samples per second.
Exactly. So these are a lot of numbers. So that's sort of how often we measure. And then we measure sort of the amplitude of the audio as well. And that's basically how high the waveform is at that particular point in time. This is where the 8-bit comes from. In 8-bit audio, we use an 8-bit number to represent the amplitude in that particular sample.
Which is basically the volume of that sample, how loud it is.
Exactly. And that is a value between 0 and 255, or I think in this case minus 127 and positive 127.
Yes, correct.
And that's it. So that's how audio works. And then basically when we read that file again, we can approximate the waveform by just, all of these discrete steps along the way. Now, 255 different values is not actually a lot to represent the full range of hearing that we as humans can hear. So the problem is that basically to make sure that we can fit all of the possible volumes in 255 different values, or 256 different values, I should say, including 0, we basically have little buckets, right? We round the volume to the nearest value that we can represent.
The nearest whole integer, basically.
The nearest whole integer. And that causes a slight, difference in the actual value.
It's almost like the phasing effect you hear, the Doppler effect when a siren goes by, I would say. That kind of stepping.
Yeah, it's different. It's a little bit different. But imagine, I think what you can imagine is, let's say that we could only represent images, right, like a photograph, with, instead of 255 different values, only with a 0 or 1. So each pixel is either black, red, green, blue, or yellow, or all of the basic colors, basically. You can still get a pretty good representation of the image, but you'd be losing a lot of detail and it would be very noisy.
Yeah.
And this is also what happens with audio, right? It gets a little bit noisy. Because essentially what happens, if you look at sort of this binary, we call it, the quantized audio, it's like little steps, right? Because of the rounding, whereas the real curve is nice and smooth.
Beautifully smooth. And that's why if you go to, the highest audio samples that you can get, if you, have like your favorite music track and it's, just uncompressed, raw, unmastered, and you go all the way up to like a 96-bit 48,000 kilohertz sample of it with floating point audio, it basically prevents any of those sorts of stepping things from happening. And what we're left with in the case of OSRS is largely from the legacy case of the audio system.
Yeah. Because like if you compare that stepped function with the actual waveform, our brain does a little bit of audio processing and can sort of interpret right how the sound is supposed to sound. But because there's this small difference because of the rounding, you can almost see that the real audio has like a layer of sort of random noise, like random like value up or down compared to the view curve, and that's what we call white noise, and that's the noise you hear in the audio.
One of my favorite analogies to this is that if you look at compressed images, specifically GIFs or JPEGs, in that if you look at them really, really closely, you can see that noise, but if you back out, it doesn't become as big of an issue.
Yeah. So I think if you want to sort of understand what's happening a little bit better, the example they give in a news post with the agility one is really quite good, because the sound is basically a continuous lowering, right? It's meant to be sort of a smooth curve starting at like a high note, and then the frequency very slowly sort of goes down to the final point.
I'll play that one right now because I got them up here.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first one was 8-bit and the second one was 16-bit.
Yeah, so what you really notice with that first 8-bit one, right, is really because it's a stepped function or the smooth function, our brain recognizes this as a low. It's like the opposite of a riser. I don't know what it's called.
And you know what the craziest thing is that if I and this is wild, and maybe I'll put a screenshot of this in the notes, but if I take a screenshot of the waveform as that was recorded, you can actually see the difference between 8-bit and 16-bit. And that's maybe also another good way of illustrating the difference.
Yeah. But like the interesting thing is like in the 8-bit one, because it's really a step function, but our brain expects a like sort of like continuous function, we kind of hear like this whoa like wobble on top of it, right? Which is sort of
I could hear it.
If you think about it, like it's sort of the difference is like this sawtooth. If you for the people.
And you know what's interesting is that's exactly what the waveform looked like.
There you go. So it's the wobble that we get rid of in this. So that's why I like the agility example, because you can hear.
I also just realized, and if anybody was listening without headphones on, they have a note on this one. This one will send your dogs wild. Headphones are encouraged. Oops.
Yeah. But yeah. Should we do one of the other one?
Yeah, I like the ice one. The ice wind.
All right, let's go to that one as well.
All right. That one's not as apparent to me.
No, and I think that's really because it's a more different frequency.
It's a more natural sounding sound, because we've heard sounds like that before in the wind when you open a door or something, right?
Exactly.
So your brain can do that approximation easier.
Yeah.
But overall, I feel like this is something that was needed to do over time, and they're not going to obviously go for full stereo audio tracks because that is not within the DNA of OSRS, but they are able with this to create better approximations.
If it's more Mod Ash on his violin.
Here's a question. Here's a question for you. What if, and this shouldn't degrade the listening experience. What if they take and convert all these things to 16-bit, right? And then for the new client, they just, serve them up as high quality, MP3, whatever, through the client on that. That shouldn't degrade the listening quality of it, and it should just still preserve that OSRS look and feel, right? So, and maybe that's actually something interesting to dive into at some point, is that I know Java is inherently limited in terms of what they are able to do with audio, but presumably with the mobile clients and the new official client, they could do practically anything with audio, I guess, in that regard. And it would be interesting, I think, to dive into the new client to just see how they serve and process audio.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I don't think they will really change it.
No.
To me, if you look at some of the more modern soundtracks in old school, they've already
They sound great.
They sound great, and I've really started to appreciate I love all of RuneScape's music, even the RS3 music. It's epic. The audio team at Jagex is, goat.
And you know what the interesting bit about that is that both games share an audio team.
Yeah, exactly. But I almost feel that the old school version of the Inferno soundtrack is better than the RS3 one, right? Even though both of them absolutely slap.
Yeah, and I actually on the RS3 side, we did we used to do these things called Behind the Crowns, and we had Mod Surma on for one of them, which was one of the most revealing and most interesting ones because it was just about audio and his passion for creating that. And one of the things we actually talked about on that episode, speaking of the Inferno soundtrack, was how he developed the original Inferno soundtrack and then how that led to the RS3 Zuck soundtracks and how they all kind of, feed back together and just work together on the same musical DNA for both games, which I think is great that they're able to share an audio team.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love, but I think the comparison that I was going to make was with what they've done graphically, right? We've talked about the Isle of Souls before and some of the newer looking areas, and it's definitely an evolution of the existing theme, but I feel they managed to keep the DNA the same. So the Isle of Souls, the trees that they use there, I absolutely love. Right? And to me, it still feels like it fits within the same world and the same style. It's not, it's not like any of the graphical reworks they've been doing in RS3, which is like a massive transition.
Yeah, and that Isle of Souls thing was the first time where I was really like, oh wow, this is the unique OSRS graphical identity, and we've continued to see things like that in Varlamore in certain areas of Zaya and whatnot. So,
I'm just hoping that the music, like moving that to 16-bit, will just make it easier to achieve and attain that amazingness.
Yeah, and keeping the door open in the future for future client updates and whatnot, and just modernizing the tech stack while still sounding like OSRS is, I guess, the deal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, this concludes the Propeller Hat portion of the episode, both in terms of
God, sorry for nerding out about it.
No, I felt like anytime you provide like a detailed explainer note list, that's like the Propeller Head version of this episode, and we should maybe do that more. Because I'll say that I, doing this podcast and just some of my formal education at the time did actually involve these sorts of media centric things in terms of like audio production, how audio is codified inside of a computer, and yet it's still interesting to hear somebody else explain what you already know in that regard with just a slightly different angle on it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So, all right. What have we been doing? To put it simply, we've been marching slowly towards the Myreki's death, which is wonderful, according to that one person in the OSRS keynote.
The Myreki are dead. Yeah, not all of them yet, but we've been slowly killing them off left and right.
Darkness of Hallowvale. A quest that was made easier by the agility plugin.
Oh, that was a lifesaver in Mayaditch, yeah.
Yeah. And the fun bit about that is that I actually did Darkness of Hallowvale twice in the same week. Old school.
Why would you do that?
Old school and on the group Ironman.
Right.
And on the group Ironman on RS3, high contrast mode saved me. And like I was mentioning on OSRS, the agility plugin saved me.
Yeah.
And, all I'll say about Darkness of Hallowvale, a run into Meyerditch that's kind of built to be a maze. Back in the day, this quest came out on a Labor Day before I was slated to begin school, and I was like, oh yeah, I can play this update. It'll only take a while, and there, lo and behold, I was up for 2.5 hours longer than I should have been doing my quest back in the day, and safe to say, doing it again was a much quicker experience in terms of our quest progression here. But I don't know. Do you have anything to say about Darkness of Hallowvale, or should we just move on to Taste of Hope, the new one to both of us?
I would love to see a modern interpretation of a quest like this, like where the area itself is a maze to be solved. I would love for them to try that again, but in a more, have more insight into quality of life and really
because the entire thing is very, very dark, which has an impact on it.
It's very dark. It's unclear where to go, and like some of the agility shortcuts work a little bit janky, but that's the idea essentially.
Yeah.
I would love to see that, because I think the underlying idea of, these are like slums that are built in such a way that half the stuff is collapsing, but also at the same time it's under some form of martial law, where it's split into sectors that you should never really cross.
Right.
Great idea.
Yeah. I wonder where would be a good place for that.
Imperium?
Right, I guess that is an option. I mean Prif and the Elf Quest became known for light puzzles. What if this became known for mazes?
Yeah, that I don't know. It could be, but it might be an I'm happy for it to be a one-off quest as well. But
yeah, I think that's best where it sits.
Yeah.
Taste of Hope, on the other hand, I felt like this was a good intermediate step in terms of ratcheting up the tension in the series. And, when you look at this quest in terms of what it's supposed to do, I feel like this quest, I think, based on my memories of the RS3 one that sits at a similar spot in the series, I feel like Taste of Hope was better.
Yeah, Legacy of Stairgaze, which is the RS3 equivalent of this, is completely unmemorable. I don't remember anything from it.
Yeah.
I remember Branches of Darkmire. I remember Darkness of Hallowvale, but before I looked it up, I didn't even remember the name of it. Legacy of Stairgaze. Okay. Taste of Hope feels like it does a much better job at rising up the stakes, getting the player involved, telling the story of the Myrek, bringing both a victory and a loss, like emotionally, narratively, it's just much better.
Yeah, and it, based on some of the things that happen in that quest, kind of do set the stage for probably what we'll see in Sins of the Father when we get there for that. And I think the thing that I'm most interested in is seeing at the end of this how the series ends, because I remember when we were doing this on the RS3 side is that a number of these quests kind of just felt like balloons deflating for that. And the sense I get from A Taste of Hope is that we're definitely better on that angle here. And, did we call that a boss fight at the end of the quest?
Look, we were massively
over prepared for it.
Yeah, well, and also just over leveled, right? This is meant to sit at a much lower combat level. Let me just.
I don't think it says what the number is. I know Sin says that you want 95.
70 combat level, and we are like 95-ish, so we are massively over leveled, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, like specifically, it recommends like having like roughly 70s in terms of combat stats, have access to protect from melee.
Piety was a big help.
Piety is a big help.
The strength bonus on the Blood Moon armor is a big help.
Exactly.
So probably a bit overleveled in that regard from where we're at, and I guess the writing is on the wall that we do have a fairly significant boss fight up next in Sins of the Father, I think.
The recommended combat level
95.
It's the same as the one for Desert Treasure, I believe. So Desert Treasure 2 to be precise.
I guess we'll do that after you get back from Japan.
Yeah.
But that's what we've been up to on the OSRS questing side. Anything else you want to add in?
Oh, it's actually 100 combat level is recommended for Desert Treasure 2. Is it Dragon Slayer 2 that recommends 95? Oh, also 100. Well, okay, never mind then. Yes, I have a small, tiny little non-serious achievement. I hit 96 farming.
Okay. Why is that non-serious?
Which makes 99 farming boostable. So I finally planted and grew all of the spirit trees in the spirit tree patches.
Oh, okay.
I just love seeing like all of the destinations available whenever I use spirit trees.
Okay.
So,
no, that is a serious achievement. I don't know why you called it non-serious.
Yeah, I mean it feels like a silly thing, like, oh, I grew all of the spirit tree patches finally, but it makes me happy.
Yeah, that's good. I need to get going and beat you to 99.
I've switched to a higher level herb, so it's gonna go faster. It's not gonna super fast. I'm not rushing it.
Yeah, fair.
Though maybe I should, because the farming cape is gonna get me more herbs, and more herbs means more money. So, but no, I'm not rushing it. But I am slowly getting to the point where my combat gear upgrades are getting more and more expensive. To the point where
so you need to win the lottery, basically.
I need to win. Yeah, I need to go and do the sand lottery.
We need to win a raffle like I did earlier in the show.
Yeah. So I really need to start getting back into some PVM, because I think that's gonna be a more sustainable moneymaker, or at least a faster moneymaker.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But unfortunately, that means needing time, and if there's anything I've been lacking lately, it's time.
Yeah, well, that'll happen eventually. As for me, I finished and I got my can, so that's it for Tithe Farm.
Yeah, like I said last time, I plan to go back there for the herb sack and the seed box, because especially for Slayer, it's nice.
Alrighty, well, that pretty much brings us to the end of the prepared remarks for this week's episode. Let us know, of course, what you guys think about our back and forth on the Shadow, where you stand on changing the shadow, and if you have any ideas what should be done with it. And hopefully you guys also enjoyed our propeller head deep dives into how the shadow works, and of course 16-bit audio. Anything else from you before we depart?
No.
Okie dokie then. Well, with that being said, we'll see you guys next week for another episode of OSRS Update. That'll be Cireon's last episode of OSRS Update for a couple weeks. Because
you're scaring listeners by not starting with for a few weeks.
Well, I mean, I'm just making sure everything's in order, because you are taking a trip to a foreign land.
Yes.
But in the meantime, of course, you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast listening services over at update.show/OS, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and more, as well as YouTube at youtube.com/@OSRS Update. It means the world to us if you like and subscribe. Helps us out in the algorithm. I realize that's a cliche thing to say, but it indeed does. And that is it for this week's episode of OSRS Update. Thanks, everybody, for being here. See you guys next week for another one. Take care.
Bye-bye.